The Hegira of Alexander Smith, an article written by Hodding, published in Sales Management Magazine, February 15, 1956, excerpted from the book First Person Rule by Hodding, published in 1963. During a hot week in August 1950, a mysterious delegation arrived in our town of Greenville, Mississippi. We knew only that the strangers represented a reputable industry up north, which was interested in locating a branch plant somewhere in the South. One man, however, wore a tie clasp which commemorated 20 years of faithful service to Alexander Smith Incorporated. A few minutes of checking revealed that we were dealing with one of the biggest carpet manufacturers in the United States. We kept the secret, and so did they. We knew that we could expect rough competition from other southern communities if they learned too soon that we had a new industry nibbling at our civic bait. And the Alexander Smith people knew what would happen back home in Yonkers, New York, if it became known that they were seeking a southern location, even for what was then envisioned only as a secondary branch. As it developed about a year after the branch factory opened in 1953, Alexander Smith Incorporated shut down the Yonkers plant and moved the entire Axminster carpet operation to Greenville. For several years, the South has been criticized for industrial pirating by political leaders, particularly in the New England. The American Federation of Labor has demanded punitive federal laws to prevent subsidized migration because it leaves in its wake poverty, unemployment, and industrial chaos. These criticisms worried me. Would Greenville's gain bring poverty and industrial chaos to Yonkers? What happens when one city acquires a new industry at the expense of another city? What does the industry gain? Why did it want to move in the first place? And now, what about Yonkers, New York, which has lost its biggest industry? How had the city been hurt? Yonkers and Greenville are about as different as two cities can be within the same nation. Yonkers, with an estimated 170,000 people, is a metropolis. Its 300 industries make it representative of the concentration of industry in the Northeast. Greenville is primarily a cotton and cattle town, a Mississippi River port with less than 40,000 people, even today. The average family income of Yonkers is $7,181, one of the highest in the United States. Greenville's is higher than the Mississippi average of $3,132, but still less than half that of Yonkers. Greenville was already a prosperous community, but we had only two fairly sizable industries, one making wallboard and the other packing cases, with a total peak employment of about 1,200 workers. We had never participated in Mississippi's controversial balanced agriculture with industry plan because prior to World War II, Greenville leaders didn't fancy our cotton kingdom as an industrial region. Under Mississippi's BAWI program, the city or county, by holding a special election, can authorize a bond issue and use the proceeds to build a plant for an acceptable industry. The industry then pays rent sufficient to retire the bonds within 20 years. Meanwhile, since ownership is vested in the municipality or county, industry pays no property taxes. This plan, which has brought more than 100 new industries to Mississippi, is the principal means by which the state's industry-hungry towns can lift themselves by their own bootstraps. And so, in 1948, Greenville too decided to go industry hunting. The friendly group from Yonkers, brought in by a paid industry locating service, seemed like the answer to our community prayer. Alexander Smith Incorporated found Greenville no less attractive. The century-old company had to establish another plant somewhere. On its 35 acres in Yonkers, stood some 60 buildings of all ages, sizes, and descriptions, which formed a generally outmoded industrial rabbit warren. For example, the raw wool coming into the plant journeyed nearly 15 miles before it emerged as a rug, in contrast to the 2 or 3 mile trip in a modern carpet factory. Moreover, the company had been caught in a post-war squeeze. Wool prices had risen fantastically. Inevitably, the price of rugs soared and the market diminished. Alexander Smith had to compete with other kinds of floor coverings and with more modern mills. Also, the company was having labor troubles in Yonkers. Greenville looked good to Alexander Smith because our water was abundant and chemically suited for scouring and dyeing. The supply of natural gas was virtually unlimited and labor was plentiful. With preliminaries settled, our Chamber of Commerce persuaded the citizens to authorize a $4,750,000 bond issue to build the nation's most modern carpet mill. Late in 1951, Alexander Smith's supervisors and trainers began arriving. They taught rug making to new employees in a converted warehouse, while on the outskirts of Greenville, a functionally beautiful plant began rising. It was nearly 2 years of building. Then in March 1953, the first Axminster carpet came off the looms. Greenville Mills Incorporated, as a subsidiary was called, employed some 300 people. Back in Yonkers, about 4,000 Alexander Smith workers continued at their jobs. There was some grumbling, principally from politicians and union spokesmen, but the proportionality small shift of production to Greenville wasn't greatly noticeable in Yonkers. It was certainly noticeable in Greenville. In June 1954, when Alexander Smith decided to move everything to Greenville, the Yonkers mill was on strike because of inability to agree on a new union contract. The Alexander Smith spokesman said the company could not meet the union's wage and other demands. The union blamed inefficient management, obsolete techniques, and failure to keep up with the times. In the year that followed, the Greenville Mill's labor force rose to nearly 1,000 workers, and Alexander Smith executive, supervisory, and clerical personnel came to settle in our town. Within a year, 500 new homes were built and sold. 5 new subdivisions opened, a new grammar school, 3 new churches, and 3 shopping centers were constructed, 2 of the last mentioned in what formerly was the outskirts of town. Our newspaper circulation rose from 10,000 to nearly 14,000. Greenville's population in the 1950 census was 30,000. Today, according to an interim survey, it's over 34,900. Alexander Smith didn't bring all these people, but the company's arrival and growth were the primary reason for an influx of new business, new distribution agencies, new people. Less than 30 miles east of Greenville, in the little town of Indianola, the Ludlow Manufacturing and Sales Company built a plant that turns out jute and cotton twine for the backing of Alexander Smith's carpets. That alone meant 300 more jobs in our trading area. There were human gains too. With the arrival of the Northerners, Greenville High School got an outstanding football player. The Presbyterian Church got a talented pianist. The Garden Club ladies discovered that ideas from Yonkers could be applied nicely in Greenville. The civic clubs gained new members. The country club got some exceptional golfers, and Greenville's voting rolls acquired some Republicans. We have profited in many ways from these new neighbors whose backgrounds, experience, and thinking are often so different from our own. Meanwhile, what happened in Yonkers? A week after the decision to close the plant in 1954, the CIO Textile Workers Union ran advertisements in New York newspapers headed, "A Lesson in Failure. That's the story of Alexander Smith, Incorporated." It described the closure as a tragedy to the workers, denied that union demands had anything to do with the move to Greenville, and called for federal tax laws that would penalize runaway industry. Later, an AFL survey reported that the pirating of plants caused unemployment, uneconomic dislocation, and sectional bitterness. Last summer, I went to Yonkers to discover for myself how the city had been affected. I talked to editors, industrialists, labor leaders, cab drivers, housewives, bartenders, and the proverbial man in the street, but I could find no evidence of tragedy, unemployment, or sectional bitterness. Instead, I found a heartwarming story of community cooperation to minimize the economic shock of the plant shutdown. I also learned that Alexander Smith's departure had brought about some healthy changes in the behavior of labor, management, and government in Yonkers. The city hadn't wasted time on trying to fix the blame. A few days later, after the plant closed, a civic committee was formed to find jobs for the displaced workers, seek new tenants for the old Smith buildings, and otherwise temper the wind in a town shorn of its wool. This Community Council for Economic Development was made up of industrial, labor, business, and professional leaders. The council was extraordinarily effective. Most of the displaced workers found jobs in Yonkers or nearby communities, and hundreds were trained for new jobs. Workers 57 years old or older were pensioned by the company or taken care of under union plans. Then in May 1955, a Yonkers syndicate contracted to purchase the old Smith property and buildings, renamed it the Westchester County Industrial Center, and offered space for sale or lease to assorted small industries. By December, the first replacements were moving in. Yonkers is confident that every building soon will be fully occupied. When that happens, more workers will be employed on the old site than during the wartime peak of Alexander Smith operations. But if the Smith departure had no serious economic impact on Yonkers, it undeniably caused other changes. There was fear that other industries would follow the carpet company's lead and seek greener pastures. The Otis Elevator Company, now the city's biggest single employer, was able to make new agreements with the unions and the municipality. Otis asked the union to surrender certain pay systems. The union agreed. The city has agreed to more lenient tax valuation, and negotiations are underway to give the company the use of 4 streets adjoining the plant. With labor, management, and government working together on behalf of local industry, a different climate exists in Yonkers today, and that new climate may spread. For the exodus of these small and diversified industries from metropolitan New York City is a part of a national movement that is taking smaller industries into the suburban areas and larger industries to less thickly populated parts of the country. What's happening is the slow breaking up of the huge and unsound concentrations of people in the big cities. The change is of real significance in connection with national defense and as an aid towards more equitable distribution of industrial wages. The South, in this expanding nation, is not endangering other regions by attracting industry. We are simply getting a bit nearer to a fair share of the national income. There are still fewer industrial workers among Mississippi's 2 million citizens than there are within a 10-mile radius of Yonkers. This won't always be true. Somewhere in the South, a new industry is being established every 24 hours. This means that someday Mississippi will no longer have to stand by helplessly while 65 out of every 100 of its college graduates leave the state for employment elsewhere. Meanwhile, we in Greenville have more than 1,000 new carpet makers who are earning wages they never dreamed of making, even if the pay does not equal the northern scale. So if anyone knows of a worthwhile industry that wants a shiny new factory, plenty of workers, a variety of raw materials, and a fine regional market, well, the address is simply Greenville, Mississippi.